And thank you for joining us for this webinar today. Today's event is part of a series of webinars that Irwin Mitchell are putting on across the various industries and for various audiences, focusing on the events that are happening right now and beyond. We all currently live in a new world, and I'm sure for all of you it hasn't been easy. What we're hoping is that our panel of experts today can provide some pointers and some tips to aid you during the current lockdown and for the upcoming summer holidays. I'm delighted to be joined by some excellent speakers today, including Dr. Kasim Ford, a psychologist and neuropsychologist, Shalina Lee, a deputy head teacher at Pace Specialist School, Lindsey Hardy, an occupational therapist and director of clinical services at Pace Specialist School, Holly Garwell, a paediatric physiotherapist, and Dr. Heather Epps, a paediatric physiotherapist. Just a few key points about today. If anybody has any questions or has anything they would like to ask any of the panel, on the right hand side of your screen is a question and answer section. Please feel free to type in a question there. It doesn't completely go live, so don't worry about that, and it can be completely anonymous, but it will come up on our screen and then we can publish it for the panel to see and can address. Secondly, during the course of the call, there will be a feedback form appearing with a couple of questions, which would be grateful if you could complete and just provide some feedback on the events today. We've got an hour today to talk to our panel, so I won't take up any more of your time, and I'm going to hand straight over to Dr. Ford to introduce herself.
Hello, my name's Kasim Ford, and I'm a clinical psychologist and a neuropsychologist, and that means that I specialise in neurological disorders. My particular interest is in brain injuries in children and in adults, and not just assessing them, but providing treatments so that the family and schools and carers can implement them, but in a way that focuses on the child and the family. So make interventions very specific and bespoke, and that way they've got more of a chance of succeeding. So today's webinar's going to be very interesting for me. Thank you. Can I pass it to you, Shalina?
Thank you. Hello, my name's Shalina Lee. I'm a qualified conductor teacher with just over 20 years experience of teaching within special educational needs. I currently work at the Pace Centre School, which caters for pupils covering EYFS through to year 9. Pace is an independent charity-run school that primarily supports pupils with motor disorders such as cerebral palsy, but also other related issues such as sensory disorders and developmental delay. Pace aims to deliver a curriculum that is integrated, so we talk about a lot of integration with curriculum and therapy. And I'm really looking forward to sharing some of my top tips with you all as well. So I'd like to pass over to Lindsey if I can now.
Apologies, I didn't turn my mic on, so apologies. So hi, my name's Lindsey Hardy. I'm an occupational therapist. I have worked for many, many years, both in the NHS and now more recently at Pace, the charity Shalina was just talking to you about. I specialise in working with children's sensory processing, regulation difficulties, and in early intervention, so children from 0 to 3 years of age with developmental challenges. I'm also the Director of Clinical Services at Pace, where I lead all the therapists, the physios, the OTs and the speech and language therapists. And we have, alongside our specialist school, we have a child and family therapy service where we have children come in from mainstream schools or other specialist schools for therapy sessions, or our babies and very young children and families that come in for therapy as well. Thank you for having me along today. And I'm going to hand on to Heather Epps, physiotherapist.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Heather Epps. I'm a paediatric and young adult physiotherapist. I have more than 30 years experience working both in tertiary centres and within the community. I have a particular interest in hydrotherapy, and my master's was looking at muscle strength and muscle indices and fatigue indices in cerebral palsy, and my PhD was in hydrotherapy. I currently run a team of paediatric neurological physiotherapists, and we've recently designed a hydrotherapy pool which will be up and running towards the end of September. Thank you very much for inviting me on today, and I look forward to taking part. I'm now going to pass you on to one of my colleagues, Holly.
Hello everyone, my name's Holly Garwell. I'm a paediatric physiotherapist based in Sussex. I also specialise in working with children with neurological disabilities and developmental delay. I'm also an associate for Edwards and Associates, which is a company, and we provide medical legal reports for children who've had neurological injury. But most of my time is spent working and directing with two colleagues a small social enterprise in Sussex called Star Physio. We set it up about 3 or 4 years ago to offer additional therapy for children 0 and upwards in our area. We had community support setting up with fundraising. We started off just offering 1 hydrotherapy session a week, and we've increased, well, before lockdown, offering 4 or 5 sessions a week. Also offer a lot of community-based interventions in schools, gyms, nurseries, etc. And just before lockdown, I'd started up a 1-day-a-week clinic. Unfortunately, it's all gone to pot for the moment. But we work with some amazing families, and our ethos is that every family and child has their own journey and has the capacity to change, and small changes can have a big effect. And we like to collaborate with lots of other professionals, including charities, NHS, therapists and sports practitioners as well. So thank you for having me.
Thanks very much, all. And so we have already received a number of questions today. So if I could go straight to start with Caseen, and maybe you could help us address about how you prepared for lockdown and how families can prepare for the upcoming summer.
I think the first thing was just make sure that families have got the right resources. For example, I mean, everybody's got mobile phones, tablets, but to guide them to the apps that they can download, or some of the videos that they can stream from YouTube, that can prepare them from some of the skills that parents and families can undertake with the children at home, that will complement homeschooling, so helping with concentration, with focusing, with memory, planning. So just preparing them for the resources, but also stressing that it's got to be fun. Yeah. So to make sure that you balance the activities of learning with fun, games and apps that are suitable for their children. So really giving them a lot of psychological support and education for resources to set the groundwork for lockdown. So can I pass it over to you, Shalina?
Sure. Yes, I think being a teacher in a school, obviously when we knew that we were going to lockdown and schools were closing, as a centre, we were very quick to try and put in as much resources, like as Kasim has said, about putting things into place that families could use. We've looked at home learning packs that we were able to send home for all our children. Those learning packs included not just academic work, but also their physical, some physical activities that we felt that was really important for our children, that we needed to keep them as active as possible. And I'm sure that's something that all families are feeling at the minute, not being able to have direct therapy. These activities included stretch programs, or things like motor programs that we felt that families could do at home. Because we had some time then, we were able to then set up Google Classrooms, and that seems to be quite a good resource if schools have set those up, where you're able to actually log into perhaps pre-recorded activities that are set up, or even live sessions, perhaps even have live motor programs. We've been trying to do that with some of our children, where they're actually meeting with the rest of their class. they're actually getting to do programs in their own home, but within a group setting. But certainly thinking about summer, now that schools are closing, we need to think about, we've got 6-week summer break. We still talk to our families about keeping some sort of a routine. I think that's still important. Now, when I say routine, it needs to be flexible as well. So you're being able to move in and out of the routine as and when you need. As much as we can tell you to timetable your day, we know in reality, children will not always follow your timetable. So, you know, have the routine, but be flexible within that. And I think just having lots of different activities, that you're not staying in a static position. You're thinking about moving, maybe even moving rooms to do an activity, moving inside, outside. Think about different positions when you're thinking about an activity that you're doing. I think Kasim's right about really keeping it very motivated, fun, exciting. I mean, if you're not finding it fun, I can guarantee you your child's not going to find it fun. So just find a way in of making it exciting and fun. Holly, I wonder if I could pass over to you to add to anything else I've got to say there.
Lovely, thank you. So yeah, the start of lockdown for me and our team was a great sort of learning curve, looking at all the different methods and ways of offering online therapy. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. And I had to move around my house as well to create a therapy space, which is actually in my bedroom. We offered all of our clients support by phone and email, and so we were available if there's questions or difficulties at any time. I think lockdown's been really, really tough for lots of families, and I really hope that summer will give everyone a chance to regroup. I would suggest, as the others have said, is trying to prepare and thinking about what you might need to offer different movement opportunities over the next 6 weeks. So if you have equipment at school, perhaps discussing with the school team whether it can come home, and it's possible and highly likely that you haven't had any physiotherapy input into school, but perhaps the physio could check the equipment by looking at a photograph or a video. So try and get the stander, the walker, the trike home. I would also suggest, because children tend to grow a lot in the summer, so perhaps get the orthotics checked as well, if you can possibly do it. And again, that might only be through an urgent appointment or by a video or a photograph by email. Perhaps plan a few boxes of toys and games that you just keep for fun activities which are physical, and also have a think about what activities you can do inside and outside.
Brilliant. Thanks, Holly. That's really great. Perhaps we can move to Heather, and Heather, you can talk about what therapies can people access right now, thinking about pre-recorded, live, personal sessions, one-to-one, and kind of the returning to the norm that we like to say as before, and what is available.
Thank you. In support of some of the comments that Holly was just explaining, there are some private orthotics available at the moment. They are casting in the car park in our local area, but there are also emergency orthotics appointments available via the NHS, but they are being looked at in priority order. So there are some orthotic support available at this moment in time. There are also stocks that the statutory physiotherapists have. So although they may have been deployed themselves and they may not be available to give any hands-on or virtual support, even in some instances, there are stocks. So if equipment, as Holly said, has been left at a nursery or a school and you've been unable to use it, particularly considering over the summer, then you can contact your local services and they may have some in stock. Alternatively, if they don't have any in stock and you aren't able to have that contact with your statutory physiotherapist, then some of the equipment companies are providing a service whereby you can loan equipment. You do have to pay a small fee for it, but it is available, particularly if you're in an instance where, for example, your child's almost at that point of maybe using a walking frame, but you can't get access to one. So that is possible to do. And then, as Holly said, either your private independent physiotherapist or, if they're available, NHS physiotherapist can then support you and direct you through using that equipment and how to set it up using video links, using YouTube. I've actually had my own son and put him into bits of equipment and videoed it and had him on virtual sessions so that people can see exactly what they need to do to support the families. So there's equipment, there's orthotics that are available. There is also some service with the NHS physiotherapist, but it might not be the physiotherapist you would usually see. As I said, some have been deployed during the pandemic, but there are some physiotherapists still providing a service. Certainly in my own area, they're not providing any face-to-face. It is all virtual, apart from with orthotics. And it's only, to the best of my knowledge, the private physiotherapists that are providing actual face-to-face sessions with PPE, but that's after they followed the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy and HPCP guidelines in terms of whether or not they can do that face-to-face, and there's very clear guidelines that we all have to follow to determine whether we can see people face-to-face with PPE or not, and virtual is always the first line. In addition to that, there are hydrotherapy pools now open, not a lot, but there are some that have opened in healthcare settings and a few have opened in hospices, and as of last night we know that leisure pools are going to open. There are very specific standards that have been laid down by the Pool Water Treatment Advisory Group and by Public Health England, which may mean that a number of pools may not open for that reason, or certainly not in the very near future. And if I could just hand you back to Holly, I don't know if Holly has anything else to add.
No, I think you've covered it all, Heather. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you both. I think the question I'd like to follow up, firstly to Heather, and then moving on to Holly and Cassini. Okay, the question for Heather, because it's coming actually just now, but it's picking up on what you just spoke about hydrotherapy. Is there, where you've mentioned that hydrotherapy may not be available, are there any alternatives that parents can consider? And then once you finish, moving on to Holly and Kasim, I was wondering if you both could just give some pointers and guidance as to whether remote therapy does what actually work, and what are your views on it? Thank you.
Thank you. People who know me will know I'm not a great lover of hot tubs because I'm so passionate about hydrotherapy and the issues that come up with hot tubs. However, I think we're in very different times. I think our situation at the moment is extremely difficult, and I fully understand why, if all the pools were open tomorrow, there would be a lot of families, particularly when their children are immunocompromised, who would not be comfortable going to a hydrotherapy pool at this moment in time. And yet they get the benefit from both the physiological effects of being immersed in heated water. There's obviously the psychological and sensory impact, and therefore they are missing a big part of their usual therapies. And I have one child in particular who used to be receiving weekly physiotherapy, weekly hydrotherapy, and he has been suffering from night cramps and pain ever since that stopped, even though we're still providing land-based therapy. So there are advantages of a hot tub over a hot bath, which is often the other argument. There are obviously health and safety issues in terms of how you get in and out of the hot tub, particularly if you have a child who is reliant on using hoisting for usually accessing pools or other areas. I can't comment on parents choose to lift children in and out. That's obviously their choice and their prerogative. The hot tub floor tends to be quite slippy. So again, you probably wouldn't want to have carers or people you've employed in there. But again, there's no reason why parents can't and take adequate precautions. You just have to be really careful that obviously you're not going to slip, particularly if your child has an aspiration risk. For those children that are more able, then if it's sufficiently sizable, there are active exercises they can do using buoyancy, using the properties of the water, not to the same degree as a hydrotherapy pool, but it's a good in between if that's all you've got available to you. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. And if we could pass over then to Holly.
Yeah. So with regards to remote therapy, you asked, does it work? And yes, I think it definitely does work, but it doesn't work for everyone, and it is very different. And it has taken me quite a while to get used to the differences. I think some of my OT and speech and therapy colleagues have found it easier to transition from face-to-face into remote because the nature of our work But I've been speaking to a number of colleagues around the world in the US and Canada and Australia who use remote therapy a lot just because of the terrain and the distances involved. I'd say that the premise of remote therapy is different, and we tend to use a coaching model as opposed to a therapy model, where you provide the carers or the parents with the tools to provide the therapy on your behalf, which is part of our job anyway, but I just think the emphasis is slightly different. I found that the sessions tend to be slightly shorter. They're about 40 minutes, otherwise it gets quite tiring for everyone involved. And what we do is we'll write a summary of what we've discussed and exactly what we've done, and then send through pictures, videos and resources, often using a therapy doll or a teddy bear to demonstrate what we've been doing. If you have consent, you can take screenshots of the sessions as well, but I haven't done that yet. And like Heather, I've been paying my 13-year-old son to act as demo model, which has been quite interesting, and he's quite keen because he gets £2 a photo. Kasheen.
Okay, from a psychological perspective, the working remotely has been extremely successful, but I have to clarify it has to be face-to-face and not telephone, because before lockdown there was a lot of counselling going via phones, and I find that not really effective. But if you have face-to-face, it's accessible, it's convenient. The other positive is you can actually interview or counsel different members of the family because they're all at home, and you get different perspectives. When it comes to treatment, you can also ensure that the whole family and the carers are implementing the same strategies. I've had some cases where some members of the family are quite happy to have counselling via face-to-face, because it just takes away the stigma of going to the hospital or clinic or to see somebody from mental health services. It's actually normalised talking about how they felt, not just during lockdown, but other issues, especially about adolescent issues. So from my perspective, it's been very successful. The only issue is not all families are geared up to the same level of technical expertise, and you can have some difficulties there. But apart from that, it's affordable, accessible, convenient, and I have a feeling that this is the way we are going to be working in the future. NHS counselling, it's cheaper, they don't have to drive to the clinics, park in the NHS car park if they get a space, you know, they don't have to take time off work, it's flexible. And I'm sure the managers in the NHS will be looking at this as a really strong way of working forwards, and also in the private sector. So it's got a lot of scope. So not all negative from the lockdown.
Right. That's really good to hear. And it's also really interesting to hear about how it's going to interact for the future as well. Shalene, parents may be worried about their children missing schools and having problems getting their children to concentrate at home. Can you give some practical pointers as to reassure parents about the children missing school or what they can be doing at home? And perhaps also, I don't know whether PACE offer any services for people who don't attend the school, so perhaps you could give some advice about that as well.
Sure, yes. Really, as a teacher, coming into September, we're really talking about restorative curriculum coming into September, that teachers are aware that their pupils have not been in school for a number of months. We are not expecting our pupils to come back having learned, you know, made loads of progress, leaps and bounds. But I think it's good to actually remember that children learn at very different levels. There will be some children where actually this lockdown, working in a remote way through whether it's Google Classrooms or home learning, it's suited some children. For other children, it's not been successful. It's not been successful for parents. So I think teachers will be aware that they will have pupils coming back at different levels. So please do not beat yourself up about, I've not completed this amount of work. We treat, as teachers, any amount of work is good. Anything that you have done is good. Any interactions that you have had, it's all about positive interactions. It's about feeling success about things that you've done. Please don't dwell on the we didn't get it, we didn't understand it. That is fine. I think that's good to make the teacher aware that this is what we really struggled with. That will be really helpful. It will be up to teachers to assess when children get back what level they are at and what work they need to put into to get them back up to speed as such. You know, it's important to remember the social aspect as well of school isn't just about academic work. They've missed out a lot of social time with their peers, meeting with other people. So, you know, really what I would say is spend time building relationships, really making things positive for your child. It's about well-being as well. It's actually not just well-being for the child, but actually as a family, as parents, all of your well-being. Think about what you need. I can say myself, a parent of 2 young children, there have been days we've had to scrap home learning for different reasons. I'm still working, my husband has worked, we've had to, you know, we've sat around the kitchen table together. Some days it hasn't worked, we've had to scrap the school work and say, we're going to try again tomorrow. Don't be afraid to say, I'm not doing any more today. It's fine to do that. I think schools have tried to give as much information as they can, and it's up to you to maybe look at what you can do. So that's maybe talking about the curriculum and, you know, missing out on schoolwork. But, you know, with regards to concentration, this is such a tricky time. We've all said it's such a change to how we work and how the children are working. So certainly some things that I've talked to our parents about are thinking about the environment that you're working in. Is it very busy? Is it too noisy? You know, it's things that I would think of in our normal classroom situation that if I know the children work in a better, quieter environment, maybe choose a room that isn't as distracting. Maybe choose a room where there aren't devices or TVs, if that's not what you're going to be using at that point. You know, maybe not as many toys. I think I mentioned more about changing environment as well. Don't underestimate just even changing your position and going to another room. And I think Heather even mentioned going outside is a good thing to do. Have a lesson outside, try doing those things, maybe consider the time of day. So if there's a particular activity that you want to do with your child and you know it's quite taxing, it's going to take a lot of, you know, brain power to do, think about the time in the day that you're doing that. You know, maybe first thing in the morning, you know, your child, they're quite alert, they're awake. That's a good time to do it. Certainly think about how they're presenting at that time when you're with them. We talk a lot about at PACE zones of regulation, and it's about your where you are in a sensory sense of are you too high? Are you too low? What is your mood like? So what I would say is, you know, as a parent, think about where your child is at that point. What can you do to get them at a just right state so they're ready to learn? We're all the same. How can we get ourselves in a just right state? So I'm sure my colleagues will probably give you some more strategies. I think, Kasim, you might be able to add some more things in there.
I mean, I just want to share one feedback I had from a mum who's doing some school learning with her child who has behavioural problems and memory issues. And she said to me, I didn't realise what a significant problem he had with his memory. By working with him, I've got a better insight. So actually, some families are, it's a breath of fresh air for them, but also they're getting more insight and they're coming back to the professional saying, can you help me with X, Y, and Z? I need some help. So we're getting more proactive teamwork with families as well. I mean, but what I do is I always say, please, please, please look at your child. What makes your child tick? Yeah, because we've got to make sure that we also give them praise. We do rewards, but in a way that are meaningful to them, so that they do know that it isn't just mum replacing the teacher and being hard, but it's also mum and dad that can be fun as well. But I always stress, get to know your child, what makes them tick, what's really going on in their head, and take it from there. Yeah, so that's all I wanted to stress on that, really.
That's great. Thank you both. I think just picking up on what you're saying, Kasim, what I think one of the big questions that we've had come through is about children's behaviour and the best way of managing children's behaviour during this time and creating that calm environment. Many parents are struggling because they don't have a routine in place at the moment. The routine's obviously changing on a daily basis with what's open, what's not open. What tips and pointers can you give, and maybe some examples to do with managing that difficult behaviour? And then maybe Shalene, you could pick up afterwards. Would be great.
I think it really is important to start the day with some structure. You know, sit down with all family members, and today we're going to do A, B and C. Perhaps put it on a chart. You can have pictures, you can have boxes, ticks, so it's like a team effort. So you do need to plan, you do need to structure, and you can prioritize what you're going to be doing with the child, but always make sure that you have a reward mechanism at the end of the activity, because that's the way you're going to engage with the child. So you do need routine, plan, prioritize, be flexible, but make it appropriate to your child. If it's something they've already done, they're good at, they've mastered, use that as a building block to just push them to the next level. Start with easy things and then gradually work to the harder ones. And I think if we can manage that, that's a starting point. If they start to begin to lose engagement, or there's behavioural issues, behavioural problems, getting aggressive, or there's issues going with siblings, brothers, sisters, redirect, distract. If you need to take them into another room, a quiet room, communicate what's going on. It could be they're tired, it could be they're hungry, or actually it's their sister or the brothers winding them up. You know, let them tell you what's going on, and then from there you can then take things forwards to how can we resolve it? Do you need a rest? Or if you can do an activity that we agree on, then you can have some time to go on your favourite toy, your game, or things you enjoy. So lots of what we call behavioural management, specifically aimed at what makes your child tick. Yeah. But Shalini, I don't know if you want to add any more to that.
I really like what you were saying just about fun things. That's so important, isn't it? That just to try and make things feel like fun. When it's fun, it doesn't feel like work. I think that's got to be the biggest thing. So some of the strategies that we've been talking to our parents about are, you know, we're giving, you know, set things like there are maths activities, there are literacy activities, but if it's not working, that maybe try and incorporate it into like a daily an activity that you'd be doing in the day anyway. Perhaps can you involve the children in cooking? Could it be that there's a theme for a day that in the morning when they're perhaps doing their motor program or some sort of stretching program, can they be thinking about what resources they're going to need from the kitchen to do something that they will do next? You know, it's almost, if you have things that link together, it gives it the day more purpose, and you'll actually find that the time will flow better. And I think that's for a lot of our pupils, they almost need that structure, then they're looking for us to give them that structure. You know, we're finding things like very practical activities like cooking or gardening, those things where actually the children are involved in something. That's actually the situations where families have actually said to us that they really appreciate these kind of activities. So it's, you know, we're trying to stay away from activities where children are just sitting doing something. I do appreciate that the children need to sit and do some things at times, but if you're finding that actually it's not working, don't be scared to just get up, go do something else, and it's fine to do that. I mean,
Shalini, what I found is different sensory modalities, and not just playing with Play-Doh and water, but actually dancing, music, singing. I found some families have found that when their child is singing, it's helped reduce stress. Yeah. Listening to music, there are some apps that have music at a certain frequency that helps calm the brain, or when they're focusing, it helps them to concentrate. There's also a fantastic app called Cosmic Kids. It's like yoga, meditation, and the children doing it. I think some of the families have benefited from it as well. So lots of different multi-sensory forms. sound, sight, touch and water-based as well. I think overlap in the physiotherapy area, some dance and drama. It's really been positive to engage the children and calm them down. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you both. We're getting some great questions through on the live event question and answers. So just to encourage again, if anybody's got questions or any follow-ups from what the speakers are saying, please do post them and I'll make sure that they're addressed and brought in. A great question that we've just had come through is, I'm struggling at home as I have other children to keep occupied and entertained. What's the best way of managing this? Perhaps if I could go to Holly and then to Lindsey, and perhaps Lindsey, another question that's interlinked to that you could also help with is about PACE's ability to help families who are not actually got their children attending the school. So I don't know if you could pick up on that and perhaps Shalene afterwards, but over to Holly firstly about where you've got to get the family involved. Holly, Mike.
Apologies. I appreciate it can be very challenging with siblings at home, fighting, etc. But I would say don't be afraid to include siblings in therapy sessions. I think parents sometimes worry that therapy should be very focused and concentrated and separate, and that can create friction with a younger sibling, for example. So if you're looking at like true family-centered practice, you look at the family as a whole and the siblings are part of that. And I personally like to involve siblings in sessions. I think they can be incredibly motivating. I mean, they can be very distracting and irritating at times, but motivating and encouraging. Perhaps look at the activity that you're trying to do and see how you can involve a sibling. For example, if you're trying to encourage time in prone over a wedge on work on head extension and neck extension, perhaps reading a book together with the sibling on the floor facing the other child, or standing against a bench. Could you put a ball on the bench and knock it over and see who can knock it the furthest? Or perhaps in a standing frame, sometimes if a child is working in a stander, we will use a step stool so that the sibling can be at the same height, and then they can do something like cooking or playing with messy play or variety of tools. But I would suggest try and include them as much as you can. Even fairly young children can have a good idea about what you're trying to do, and if you're very encouraging and reward them and give them lots of positive praise, it tends to work much better. But Lindsey might have some other ideas.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot's been said actually already from all the speakers, but I think one of the key things, whether you've got one child or multiple children, is in these challenging times is first of all to be really patient with yourself as well as the children. It's being kind to ourselves is probably key, because if you're not in a good place, as has already been mentioned, it's not really very easy to then be helping the children to be in a good place as well. So helping yourself to be calm, and then you can help the others to come on to play. When we're playing, we're in a place where we feel safe and secure. We don't really play and engage in a positive way if we don't feel in that place. So as adults around our children, we give off a lot of non-verbal communication as to how we're feeling. If we're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, we can give off that to the children, and then that can wind them up or sort of shut them down a little bit and create more challenges. So stepping back sometimes and just recognizing how you're feeling, even these have been challenging times for everyone. So that's probably a number one, if you like, in my list of things to help yourself when you're working, helping your children to work or to play, and then allowing yourself to be in the moment. So you've got 101 different things you've got to think about. You've been expected to be parent, therapist and teacher all rolled into one, as well as everything else probably working as well. So, if you can allow yourself just to be in the moment, so put those other things away, allow them to be put to one side, they'll still be there afterwards, and allow yourself to play alongside your children, with your children. be in the moment with them, because children will often then engage for longer if you can allow yourself to be involved with them as well. They often really enjoy that. So for all of us, our behaviours are a form of communication. So when you're observing what's going on with your children and they are really overexcited or upset or in that fight flight sort of mode, then it's telling us that, you know, for them this is stressful. They're not going to be in a position to learn or to play. So again, thinking about what de-stresses, so you being calmer, keeping things simple, maybe putting some toys and things away actually, and just start to bring out 1 or 2 things at a time rather than have everything out at once. That can be overwhelming for all of us. Just doing, as everybody said, you know, keep things more simple, keep them small steps, and really, you know, enjoy the small steps that you and the family are making. You know, positive praise in those situations, looking for the positive and enjoying that together, showing each other, the other children, what somebody's done well, and holding that up is a really nice thing to do. And I think as Shalene has already said, and Holly, you know, engaging in household tasks, you can learn so much when you're doing sorting the washing, for example, weighing out things if that's possible in your cooking, digging things in the garden if you have access to a garden. It's motor, there's every single activity that we do in the world has motor components, it has sensory components, it has cognitive components if we want to look for them, and they can all be made playful if we're in the right place to support our children to be there. So yeah, all the things that we've already talked about, the singing, the dancing, all of these everyday activities can be really fruitful and help to engage everybody. The other thing I was going to say was things like creating camps for your children or cozy places behind the sofa if the children can get into those spaces, somewhere that's like a chill out space that's got big pillows and cushions if you can do that. Can be a really nice place as well to have people calm down a little bit. Sorry,
Christine, I was just going to add that I think I absolutely agree. And you know what I found that's really been a success is behaviour tracking apps. You know, you've got them for all ages, but they're actually very useful. They replace the old-fashioned star charts, and you get some with thumbs up. And I've had children actually monitoring their own behaviour, and it's feedback, and it's empowered them, and they've had to go back to mum and dad and look, I've got so many thumbs up now, can I have my PlayStation? And it's giving them the control and making them feel that they are doing well. So just there's quite a few on the market, but they are really very helpful behaviour tracking apps for all stages.
That's great, Christine. I don't know, are you able to potentially, or any of the speakers, give some names to some potential apps that people could download, and also even music, because I know there's been a couple of mentions about music. So again, if there are names of any apps that any of you can recommend.
I'm sure I can provide a resource pack at the end of the webinar, but things like iReward, there's Thumbsters. So iRewards for younger children, Thumbsters are slightly older, but they're just 2 that are just, and they're free. And they're both, I think you can get them on Apple and Android, but there are all sorts there, simple to use, not expensive and effective. But I can give some more names on a resource pack. Yeah.
Brilliant, that's great, and we can make that available to everybody afterwards, so thank you very much. I just want to move on slightly actually now and turn to Heather and Holly to have a bit of a discussion about exercise and what do I need to ensure that my child is doing. Actually, what should I be ensuring that I'm doing as a parent? How much exercise should I be doing, and how can I encourage this? And actually, we've had a great question being asked, which this will be an interesting one. I'm interested to hear the answers. What can we do beyond walking?
Okay, so the Chief Medical Officer back in September 19 provided guidelines for children who don't have any disabilities, aged between 5 or physical disabilities, aged between 5 to 18 years, whereby they stated that children and young people should engage in moderate to vigorous, intensity physical activity for an average of at least 60 minutes a day across the week. So all of the programs that we've put together and my team have put together have had that at the back of our minds. But the most important thing, I think, is to remember that what you're looking to do is to minimise the amount of time that is spent sedentary, and whenever it's physically possible, to break up long periods of not moving, irrespective of what level of ability your child has. And I think if you can break up and have movement breaks throughout the day, that is really quite important, not just from the physical, but also from the cognitive and being alert and aroused for learning, in addition to all the health benefits of movement. So although that's the recommendation by the CMO, to me, that gets broken up over the day. And I think you also have to look at reducing being sedentary as opposed to how much intensive physical activity can we do. I think that's one of the real key things, and that any activity, any exercise is better than none. Other than walking and being outside, it obviously depends what you have available to you, but trikes are great. A lot of children have adaptive trikes. Again, some of the physiotherapy departments will have some potentially in stock. You can also loan them, and they can come with a whole range of adaptations. If you've got a trampoline or have access to a trampoline, your physiotherapist can give you some suggestions on different rebound activities, and they're very, very easy to teach. And again, that can be going from your child who has very minimal volitional movement right through to your very active child, where, as was mentioned before, you would need to look at the sensory impact and maybe modify the activities and the games that you do on there. And again, the trampoline's a great place to have a sibling on. The sibling can be creating the bounce for the child who needs their therapy, as an example. And again, you can bring in your singing, you can bring in lots of different games. So the trampoline is a great place to be if you have access to one. Other activities that can be done, obviously if you've got a dog, that's great, because patting dogs is great therapy anyway, and then to be taking the dog outside or even in the garden if you don't have anywhere else that you're able to take them. There's lots of things on the television, and I know apps have been mentioned, but also on YouTube. One of the children's favourites I work with is a Superman song, where we do all the different activities, and we do a mixture of hand over hand activities and activities they can do themselves. So there's lots out there where the children can also model from other children and model on other children and mirror what they're doing. And that's even down to CBeebies. There's a whole range out there. And as has already been mentioned, the dance and the dance activities. If you're in liaison with your teaching staff who cover PE, also looking at what their learning objectives were for the term, looking at what they were working towards, and then that's also going to help for September, and incorporating that into the home. And again, sometimes you can bring that in with your other siblings. I've got families where we've made nets by using canes and just getting some netting that you get from the garden centre, and then we've used that for safety, for using plastic golf sticks and plastic balls. We've also used that for we've made chutes as well out of sort of the old piping, and use that for making bowling outside, knocking skittles down, or we've just knocked down plastic things that we've taken out of the kitchen, really. So we've made up bowling activities, we've made up other activities that can mimic boccia. So there's lots of things you can do with your own household items or from the garden centre. The garden centres are great. I hope that answers the question. I'm sure Holly's got other things she would add.
Well, I think you've, am I muted? No. I think you've covered most of it, Heather, actually, but I just wanted to point out that some families I've spoken to are really concerned about their children and have noted that they've lost fitness over lockdown, and they're really worried and feeling very bad about it, comparing what they're doing now versus what they did before. And I just wanted to be reassuring that I think in the first couple of months of lockdown, there was so much worry and stress, and it's really very challenging to focus on anything else other than survival in those sorts of situations. So, yeah, if you've lost skills and you've lost fitness, it's like if you've had an injury yourself. Just try and focus on where you are now. Think about where you are, not where you were before, and try and let go of the guilt. And perhaps record what you can do. And you could record, obviously it's going to vary from every single child, but how far you can walk, maybe how fast you can walk, how fast you could crawl, how long you could stand in a stand-up for. I mean, it's multiple. You could think of many different ways of measuring, but if you record it, then you can monitor this over time and monitor over the next 6 weeks, and try and think of your total activity level over a whole week, because of course some days are going to be more active than others. And I would suggest, along with others have said, is try and get outside as much as possible. It's not only good for you, it tends to make life a lot less stressful. And we've discussed already all the different resources, the yoga, dancing. I mean, you can dance anywhere. You can dance lying on the floor, you can dance in a wheelchair. Obstacle courses can be great, climbing over cushions. Take one activity and see how you can make someone a bit more breathless by picking up hundreds of socks, for example. There are many different ideas and opportunities. And when you go out walking, yes, it can be a bit tedious just walking. Perhaps I have one family that always went out and dropped little bits of paper, which they called fairies, before, and they would go up and pick them up and down from the floor, and practice squatting, get a bit of chalk, draw the chalk on the pavement. Yeah, lots of different ideas.
Thanks, Holly.
Holly, I just want to say, Holly, a lot of the children I've worked with, they say Fitbit is an activity tracker. They really quite like using Fitbit. It gives them feedback of how much they walk during the day, and again, we use that as a reinforcer as well of activities. They just love these gadgets. You can tell by my age, I call them gadgets, but if you use them in a way that's modern and they feel that they have achieved, and they come back and say, look how much I've done today, Mum, and that's really great. So Fitbit fits in nicely, you know.
Yeah. Sorry, there was one other thing I'd meant to mention as well that I found has worked really well, is having a game of the day and a game of the week. And it's a game that's been chosen by the child, so they're empowered to be involved in the therapy, and they're in control of some of the therapy, and also using their imaginative play as well. So letting them start playing a game, and then you field that game into doing activities that you think will be beneficial for them, but actually it's been their game and it's been their choice. Sorry, I just meant to mention that before. No,
please. This is brilliant, and I think all this additional information that's being provided is going to be so helpful. I just there's a couple more questions I want to try and get in this tight time that we've got left, and also hand over to all of you to give some final thoughts. But before we do that, we've had a couple of questions come through that perhaps Shalene and Lindsey could help with. And I think one of them is a really good question about a family's looking to send their young child to nursery for the first time. The child's got undiagnosed cerebral palsy, had HIE-free at birth. What sort of questions should they be asking the nursery to make sure it's the right environment? And then the second question that perhaps Lindsey may be able to also pick up on is, what advice would you offer for a child who is struggling with simple activities like drawing shapes and numbers, and perhaps can you give any techniques to enable parents to do at home to help them and to help them concentrate?
Okay. Perhaps, Lindsey, if I think about the setting one. So just thinking about any school setting or nursery setting that you're looking at, it's questions that you would think about for any neurotypical child as well. But what do you like about the nursery? What is it that when you go in and you've looked at it, what have you liked about it? But specifically also, if you're thinking about kind of the journey ahead as well, what therapies may be involved? Is it a special needs nursery? Is it a mainstream nursery where therapists would come into? So certainly I'm guessing if you're at a nursery stage, perhaps you're in the process of having an EHC plan. And it's maybe thinking about having really clear information from therapists about what your child's needs are. It's about checking with the setting as well. Are they able to meet these needs? How would they meet them? Really, there are lots of different ways that perhaps settings may choose to deliver therapies. Now, PACE, we're very much about integrated therapy and academic work where it all happens together. I feel, obviously that's where I work, I feel that works. It's up to you to maybe think about, do you want your child to come out to have their therapy and then back into the session? Does that work? Do you think it's got good flow? Maybe it's asking about what training the staff have in the setting. Would your child have a specific key worker that would work with them and just them? What would happen in a situation perhaps where the staff that know that child, if they're not in with them, what would happen? These are just a few questions. I'd be happy to give any more advice later if that's helpful to anybody else. Lindsay, I wonder if you might want to pick up about the, simple tasks like drawing shapes and number work. How can we make it accessible to some of our children?
Trying to unmute. Thank you. Yes, so the whole writing issues that we often face. So first of all, it's really thinking about where your child's hand skills are at the moment. So are they able, are they interested in exploring the world with their hands? So some of your children might not even be that interested in that just at the moment. Making sure that we want to be able to look at what our hands are doing. So for us to be able to write, we need to have what we call eye-hand regard. We need to watch what we're doing with our hands, and sometimes children find that a bit tricky to do. So really starting with activities where they're actually watching what their hands are doing. So that could be playing with putty, doing the cooking again, making some bread dough, or something where they're actually looking at what their hands are doing and registering that when they do something with their hands, something happens as well. So starting off sometimes quite a basic level, helping them to get things like pointy fingers or pinch grip is important as well, typically, for us to be able to do handwriting. So again, like helping with things like pegging things on a line, even if you have a piece of rope that's much lower in the garden, for example, and they could put, their own clothes out, for example, or finger pointing. So there's on iPads, there are apps that they need to trace where they're going, which is a good thing to do, which obviously children are often a bit more engaged about. Any activities that forces them, sorry, a bit dramatic, isn't it? But encourages them to point with their fingers, to pick things up with what we call a tripod grip is really helpful as well. And then in terms of them actually using pencils or crayons or other tools like that, is take the pressure off making it about writing. Just ease off, completely ease off, and just think about it in terms of exploration. So one of the things we often suggest is if you do have a table, like a dining room table or a kitchen table, you can get now the hardware shops are open as well, as like the big lining paper that you use for lining walls. Just put that over the table and stick it down with your sellotape and just let them scribble, let them do anything. Don't make it into anything, just allow them to explore with different felt tip pens, crayons, etc. Often having shorter utensils is better. You're encouraging the right grip. If we have really quite short things, so stubby short pencils and crayons is good. Outside, getting water with a paintbrush, getting them to paint, with water on, if you've got any patio, or at the wall of the house, if you've got that available to you, so that they're just playing with all the things that are precursors to handwriting. And then in terms of actual writing letters, remember the components. So we would tend to support children to just do big movements from up from the top to the bottom, singing with them. I won't do that now for you. That might encouraging going from the top to the bottom. Put a smiley face or something they're interested in. If they're interested in dinosaurs or whatever it might be. Putting something that they draw down to get the food for the dinosaur, something of that nature, and then crossways, horizontally, and then diagonally. So for us to do handwriting, we need all those components. And if they're not there for us at the moment, then that makes it a big leap to then be able to actually write letters and numbers. So the most helpful thing probably is just to reinforce some of those components in a playful, again we get back to the playful nature of things. So yeah, I don't know if that's helpful. Hopefully
that's really helpful. Thank you. Time is literally up against us, so what I'm going to do is, if I could ask each of our great panel just to finish off by giving their 3 top tips for the summer and any final comments or remarks, and if we go round, and I'll start with Cassine Ford, and then if you could pass over, that would be great.
From my perspective, I would say be creative. Yeah, creative, just what works for your children, what works for family. Be creative and be flexible. Yeah, and I think if you get those 2 right, you're on to a good start. I'm not going to say all the others, because then the other panel won't have anything to contribute. I'll leave it at that. Okay, over to you, Shalini.
Thank you. I completely agree. Be flexible. Have some structure. I think some structure helps. Most of us kind of crave that. So keep a bit of structure. Fun, motivating, engaging, exciting. If it's good fun, if you're enjoying it, your children will enjoy doing it as well. And also something quite important, take time for yourself. I think if we're well in ourselves, we're able to help the other people around us. Okay, I'm going to pass on to Lindsey now.
Sorry, yeah, just really emphasize, continuing with what you've said there. I think the key thing is about patience for yourself as well as for your children and the skills you're trying to support them to gain. Being able to, we can only be playful as adults and have fun ourselves and encourage the others if we're in a non-stress state. So making sure that we are feeling calm and in the moment. So allowing ourselves to put all those other things to one side that we have to worry about, and then we'll be more available to help the children.
And perhaps Heather, if we can come to you.
Thank you. I think, as we've said already, one of the key things is to keep active, to try and keep to a routine, to have fun and not feel guilty if you can't undertake all your therapies. We're all only human at the end of the day, and one thing from a physiotherapy perspective is really just be aware if your child's having growth spurts, so that you can ask for that help, and so that by the time you get to the end of the summer, you have had a little bit of help along the way. And then the only final thing I wanted to say was I forgot to say where I'm from. I'm actually from Children's Neurophysio, which is where we'll be having our hydro pool. And for those who need it, we will be undertaking intense rehabilitation in the October half term for anyone who is really struggling, and it will be daily therapy, both hydrotherapy and gym-based physiotherapy. And thank you very much for inviting me, and I hope everyone has a nice summer.
Thank you. Everyone's pretty much covered what I wanted to suggest. The only other thing was, if you can try and make activity a habit, it's great. If you create a habit rather than thinking about it, it makes it much easier to do. And I've got this book that I've read called Atomic Habits by James Clear, and it's a brilliant book that just simplifies how you can change your behaviour by doing things like scaffolding something to another activity. So, for example, I now do strength training before I have a shower in the morning, and I don't think about it, I just do it. So it does make life a lot easier. And thank you very much for inviting me along today. It's been really nice to speak to you all.
Great, thank you everyone. On behalf of everyone at Mitchell, we're very grateful for your time, and thank you for your excellent tips. The purpose of the webinar today was to address an issue that we've seen developing with some of our clients and parent carers as an impact of lockdown, and so I find that very interesting, so thank you for all the contributions, and hopefully that's been useful for those attending. The video of the recording of this webinar will be available online shortly, along with a written Q&A fact sheet from questions and answers given. We'll also try to make Dr. Ford's resource pack available as well online, along with some top tip videos. Make sure you follow us on social media and follow us online to see when those are set up. And finally, again, thank you for everyone attending, and thank you for everyone who's come along today.